Welcome. So glad you tuned in on Leap of Faith as we explore ethos. Ethos is about the characteristic spirit of our Catholic culture. It is about trust, credibility, authority. We partner with the University of Dayton as we seek to explore critical issues of our church that help us to broaden our perspective and reimagine our faith. Take the leap with us. Explore the religious imagination. Hi, our theme for today is educating our children for engaging in our world of beauty and wonder. This program on early childhood education is the second of two parts discussing the holistic and holy development of children. The importance of engaging children with the natural environment and natural elements is a pathway to learning. This idea connects with Pope Francis's invitation regarding being engaged with caring for the earth in both Laudato Si, care for our common home, and Laudato Deum. Praise God. So I want to introduce you right now to our panelists. Dr. Shauna Adams is the Executive Director of Early Learning, which includes the University of Dayton's Demonstration School. She's a professor of early childhood education and serves on a number of early childhood councils and committees up to national levels. She is a co-author of an early childhood faith formation series titled Stories of God's Love, as well as a textbook in early childhood program administration. Dr. Adams has received high acclaim in her field and was even awarded the 2022 AACTE Margaret B. Lindsay Award for Distinguished Research in Teacher Education. And we also have with us today Sister Angela Ann Zukowski. She is the Executive Director of the Institute for Pastoral Initiatives and is a professor in the Department of Religious Studies at the University of Dayton. She has been associated with the Caribbean, the Archdiocese of Port of Spain, and this Living Water community for over 28 years. She is also one of the co-producers of our Ethos program. So let's get more into our content. Contemporary children spend considerably less time outside than children of previous generations. This we know well. How can education help children engage in outdoor experiences as a positive step for reconnecting young children with nature and allowing them to participate and explore their intrinsic interest in the natural world? 32 studies recently reported in education literature indicated 98 positive child development outcomes of nature play. When these outcomes were mapped to early childhood education for sustainability outcomes, nature play was determined to be a valid contributor to sustainability. But the motivation and the capacity to be taught by the world is not totally innate. It needs to be nurtured and sustained by us adults. Early childhood teachers are part of the play context and have a role in mediating between the child and the world. So, Dr. Shauna Adams, let's start with you. Nature-based learning is an educational approach that engages children with the natural environment and natural elements as a pathway for learning. Although it often occurs in natural settings, it can also occur in built environments where natural elements are added to promote learning and skill development. It can extend to engagement in any subject, skill, or area and in interdisciplinary ways. So I want you to please share with us, why is nature so important for child development in general and in faith formation specifically?
I would be happy to. It's an excellent question. I would have to look at kind of classifying things pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. We know that pre-pandemic, we were highly committed to a nature-based approach, and our playground even won an award for its layout because we capitalized on nature so very much. However, post-pandemic, it's even more important. Preschoolers at the current 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds have spent so much time in isolation. They were not out in the world as much as other kids, spent a lot more time probably on the screen, and they just do not seem to have the sense of wonder that children have had in the past. So our teachers really work very hard to inspire them, to demonstrate wonder themselves. And I was so glad that you brought up that it's not just a total natural setting, which is something that we also engage in, but there's also a built component. And it just makes me think of a story from over the summer where one of our master teachers, Whitney Gardner, had her class out, and a little boy found a praying mantis, which I'm not sure whether you have praying mantises in Trinidad, but they are very interesting, longer stick bugs, and they really captured the group's attention. And so the children were all gathered around the slide, which is where the praying mantis sat, and they're all talking around it, and a little boy named David started an unusual screech of excitement. And it must have been just at the right decibel because that praying mantis turned and looked at him. The children were captivated. David was like, "Did he hear me?" The other children tried to imitate what David was doing, and to no avail. They did not look at the other children. David made that scream again, and that praying mantis looked at him, which started an entire investigation and so many questions about, well, do praying mantises even have ears? By the way, they do. They are in their back quarters between their legs, which the children found incredibly interesting. And at that point in time, while they were outside, the teacher pulled out her smartphone and she just Googled it, and she found out that praying mantises do hear, and they do tend to look at a certain decibel. And now we have thrown in terms like decibels and all kinds of other questions about praying mantises. That went on for a while, and the children finished their play, and the next day they came out to find the praying mantis and also play on the playground. And they looked, and he was no longer on the slide, but David made his sound. And everybody just started panning out and looking for that praying mantis. They found it, and he still turned his head every time David made that sound. It is taking the natural occurrences that are so amazing and full of wonder that we see out in the environment, and making sure that teachers are able to use inquiry statements, turn everyday examples into inquiry moments. They don't need to know everything. They just need to know where to find the information, and they need to inspire that sense of wonder.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adams. Thanks for sharing that story involving preschoolers with us. We have read about another group of preschoolers participating in a garden project in South Korea. They made significantly higher gains in scientific attitudes and nature-friendly attitudes than preschoolers not participating in the project. While in the garden, the participating group experienced self-directed and cooperative learning, engaged in the scientific process, demonstrated nature-friendly attitudes, and showed an increase in their sense of wonder, something we all need more of. So, Dr. Adams, what specific approaches do you apply in your teaching and research for nurturing children's respect, engagement, and love in and with nature and the outdoor world around them? Can you share that with us?
I certainly can, and I actually have read that research, and I applaud the researchers because gardening provides opportunities for children in every subject area. We find it to be so important that we start our gardening project in February, where it is wintertime here in Dayton, Ohio. But we go ahead and we mark out with painter's tape the size of the garden on our floor in our block area, and we provide all kinds of examples of different seeds that could be planted, and the children have to work together to decide what they want to plant and what the implications of their choices are. They always want to plant watermelon or pumpkin. And so we've created these map pieces that show the size that that plant would take. And so they will move these mats into their garden plot and see, man, we do not have enough room to grow anything else if we grow watermelon. So then they'll try their second favorite, pumpkins. Also the same problem. So sometimes we will do some research. Are there other ways of growing these items? Maybe we don't need to have giant pumpkins. Maybe they can grow vertically. They have to agree. We'll have radishes. You can get a whole lot of them in a certain area, but nobody wants to eat radishes in a preschool classroom except for maybe David. But the rest of them did not want radishes. So they have to negotiate based on size, based on what they're going to eat. Strawberries are always one that comes to the forefront, but that growing season doesn't last very long, so they would not be able to eat the strawberries for very long. So many factors come to play. By the time it's, we go ahead and we plant the seedlings, they take care of them, and then on mid-May, they will go out and plant them. They will have cultivated the garden. Frequently, they will harvest things throughout the time that they're on their playground. We frequently have kids pulling carrots out of the ground, looking at it to see, not quite ready, pushing it back down. Or if they're going to read or they're going to go ahead and eat it, they know to take it over and wash it. At the end, we have a farmer's market, and then we're able to bring in concepts of money and advertising and all of those things. How do you package it? How do you put it in a place that is interesting? So I can't speak enough to the importance of gardening and how appropriate and motivating it is for children. The key is that you have to involve play.
You know, Shauna, as you're talking, I'm thinking about how important that sense of wonder and sense of curiosity is for children. And I wonder at times if wondering and curiosity isn't being lost in our world today because everything is so programmed through electronics. And, even Google, I say to my students, they're not young little kids, but, if you want a question, you Google it. That's great because we get funny information. But that whole idea of discovery and wonder, recently I was reading an article by my friend, brother Guy Calamaggio, who's the astronomer at the Vatican Observatory. And they were talking about a research of just the universe, of how many galaxies are beyond the Milky Way. And I'm thinking that whole sense of wonder, and yeah, how different our children would live daily if they had this sense of wonder. Do you have an idea about how we would? I mean, I think you're doing that with creation of gardening, of that sense of wonder, but how do they bring that into their conversation with God?
Excellent question. And I would have to say that making making the tie to the Pope's Laudato Si and our environment. I mean, there is never a time that we go out on the playground that we can't say, look at what God has created. I also believe that we have a tendency to take the creativity and sense of wonder out of our students. I've done a little experiment where I have a pile of fabric and seeds and buttons and bottle caps and sticks, and there's no instruction, and I plop it down in the middle of tables of 5 students, and I say, go ahead. And they look at me like I have 3 heads. And I don't give them any directions. And they start asking questions about whether they're right or whether they're wrong.
Right.
And so then I show them what I've done with the 4-year-olds. And 4-year-olds, I mean, they dive in, they're building everything. It's a sense of wonder. Oh, this is so cool. I've had one of these at home. I videotaped it, and then I show my students and I say, what happened? What happened to you that you can't have this sense of wonder, that this was such a daunting task that 4-year-olds could do automatically?
Yeah. So I have another question, and then I'll turn this back over to Natasha. You know, I wonder, because I think about this as our students get older. So, you know, I'm sort of making a bridge between what we're talking about early childhood and older. Do we not, when we lose our sense of wonder and curiosity, do we lose our sense of creativity and imagination?
Absolutely. They are so tied together. And our best teachers, when we are interviewing for teachers, one of the criteria that we're looking at is we ask questions about sense of wonder, or we bring in an object and say, what would you do with this? Because that sense of wonder is the most important thing that we can have with children, to inspire them, to engage them. And it has been lost, not necessarily with our teachers, but the children have not had the experience of being with teachers with a sense of wonder because of the pandemic.
Well, right. And I think the piece is, sometimes then they think they're going to get it wrong unless there's a right answer. And sometimes there isn't a single right answer. It's in the imagination and creativity and wonder that we discover something new that we never saw before, or no one else ever saw before. And to trust that experience. How do we trust that experience in us?
I just always have to go back to an example, and let me know if I'm going too long, but this one is a really cool example. We had the children found something on the playground, and they couldn't identify what it was. It was round like a ball. It was probably an old ball from one of those play areas that kids jump into the ball pit, but we did not tell them that. It had become very muddy and dirty and mossy, and that teacher saw their sense of wonder and said, I think we need to be young detectives and see if we can figure out what this is. They spent the next month doing experiments on that ball to figure out what it was. They thought maybe it was an egg. So they built a nest out of blankets and watched it for a week or two, and they decided, no, it's not an egg, it's not going to. Then they thought it was a seed. So they put it in the bird feeder, or where the squirrels come to get seeds, and the squirrel was not interested. They tried to plant it, it didn't grow. They started cutting it open, and then they finally came to their conclusion. But the teacher embraced the errors, that she embraced the risk-taking. And that is so very important when you're establishing a sense of wonder.
Yes. You know, as both of you were talking there, I was thinking just being open to the present moment and the wonder of the present moment, you know? So, Sister Angela Ann, one of Pope Francis's central messages to the world today is contained in his encyclical that Dr. Adams just made mention of. I made mention of before, Laudato Si. And of course, most recently in his apostolic exhortation, Laudato Deum, encouraging all to take rapid and ambitious action to address the needs of the planet and of our brothers and sisters all around the world. So share with us what are a few key points from these documents for encouraging educators, parents, catechists to embrace the vision of these documents, especially teaching younger children and probably having them open to that sense of wonder.
No, thanks, Natasha. One, this leads into our just former conversation that Shauna and I just had. But, you know, Pope Francis has such a sense of the beauty of the world and the sense of wonder. And he wants us to see, which he brings out in both of those documents. He talks about integral ecology and integral spirituality. That means things don't exist in silos. Everything is connected. We can't stand apart from it. Everything that we do in relationship to the earth and the world has another impact on something else. We know that. We're studying this in global warming. But I also think it's not just global warming. It's how we deal with, we belong to a throwaway society, and Pope Francis talks about this. I mean, I can't even find a shoemaker in the city of Dayton, or try to find a tailor. They tell me, well, people just wear it and they throw it away. I says, give me a break. I remember growing up where you always had a pair of shoes and you kept taking it back because they were made much better, I'm sure, than they are made today. But this throwaway culture that we just throw things away, we don't feel this connectedness with anything, of preserving anything. And I think this is what Pope Francis is trying to talk about in this, in both of the encyclical and in his exhortation, is that we need to be engaged and we need to preserve, not just use. You know, the Native Americans, Pope Francis indirectly relates to this, but you know, Native Americans had this attitude that you never destroy anything, you never tear anything down unless you think about what the impact will be on the 7th generation. And I think we need to think about this, that this world isn't just for me, but it's for the 7th generation. Mm-hmm. And so creating this kind of journey, I think, is just really important. So that sense of curiosity, having it being in communion, in union with the world, I think it changes everything what we do. And what Shauna is talking about, how they're working with early childhood. If children can learn this at an early age, how to respect the earth and respect everything that they have around them and care for it, our common home is what Pope Francis talks about, then we'll begin to change attitudes and behaviors and the way we relate in the world. And that's what we need to do in catechesis. Mm-hmm. We not only talk about the intellectual elements of our faith, but also the practical reality. God created the world, we read in Genesis, and he said everything was good. There is no junk in the world. Everything is good. It's how we misuse it that becomes the problem. So teaching that is important.
Yes, and teaching about that whole cycle of life and intergenerational equity. I agree with you, because as you care for the world and the world cares for you, we live in it. So Dr. Adams, how do you see Pope Francis's ecological insights and challenges specifically relating to your goal as an early childhood educator?
I often think that Pope Francis was an early childhood educator. He knows the importance of looking at things in depth and repeating things in an interesting way so that you can expand kids' knowledge. I mean, we always have at least one classroom doing some kind of a recycling project. When we look at things that are, you know, that we're putting into our recycling bin or into our trash bin, we always talk about what could we have done so that we had less in here. We use our technology to look at In our city, we have some issues with ecological justice, and so we were able to look on an iPad at our landfill, so that they were able to see. Obviously, we're not going to take the kids on a field trip to the landfill, probably not the safest place, but we were able to have it be a window of the world. We have to tie Pope Francis's message throughout the day, so much so that it becomes part of their lens. So when the children see them tearing out sod in one part of the playground to put some steps, and they know that we have another part of the playground that doesn't have sod, watching them pick it up and carry it over to put in the area where there was no sod and on another hill. And then they had to investigate, how do you take care of sod so it doesn't die? And it became a teachable moment, but it was because children were looking at the lens of taking care of the world and not wasting. While not every aspect of Laudato Si is something that on face value may be appropriate for preschoolers, there are so many areas that we can tie to it directly, and it is very important. And in faith formation, there is no common idea of what faith formation should be for preschoolers or what should be taught. There's no national standard in our country. There may be in Trinidad. And so many people will use Laudato Si as kind of a springboard to help determine what to teach in faith formation for preschoolers.
Yeah, and Dr. Adams, we keep hearing now about stream curriculum. And this is what Sister also said, Pope Francis is talking about integral ecology. So why is it important to weave faith formation throughout the day?
I think I've given, in every example that I gave you was an example of stream curriculum. Was it an example of an opportunity to talk about the gifts that God has given us? Whether it's a praying mantis, and look at what we learned from there. We learned how to effectively use technology. We learned new vocabulary. We learned science, like the term decibel, and that we have a way of measuring sound. Look at gardening. We're plotting things out. There's geometry in that. And the food that God has given us, the earth that He has given us to take care of this food. Teachers know that they need to make that connection throughout the day. So it is woven throughout the day. And when teachers make that connection, it expands children's lens and it becomes part of who they are.
Yes, I understand. Sister Angela Ann, do you want to close us off with telling us your thoughts of, embracing a sense of beauty, a sense of wonder in our lives, and how can we, the adults, help change the mindset of our children for generations to come?
Now, I just love the idea of beauty. I taught for many, many years a course on vocation in the arts, and we use two documents. That's why I want to encourage our audience to look at them. Pope John Paul, or Saint John Paul II, wrote a letter to artists. It's a beautiful letter. He himself was an artist. He was a musician. He was into drama and poetry, but he also saw the world beautiful. I mean, he was great in athletics, so he spent a lot of time out in the world. But I think he, and then Pope Benedict XVI wrote an apostolic letter to artists as well. And both of them speak about understanding beauty. And Shauna's been talking about that. It's an attitude we need to develop today. But Pope John Paul II, he said, he noted a Polish poet, which is great because he was Polish. Pope John Paul was Polish. He's at Cyprian Norwood. He wrote, "Beauty is to enthuse us for work, and work is to raise us up." I love that quote. And so I repeat it. Beauty is to enthuse us for work, and work is to raise us up. So I think this sense of beauty is going to enhance our children's lives so much. And he goes on to say, the theme of beauty is decisive for a discourse on art. It was already present when God's delighted gaze upon creation and perceiving that all he had created was good, God saw that it was beautiful and it was well. And that's what beauty is. And when we start using the language of beauty and new language, we have to introduce that kind of language into our vocabulary of how we speak about this integral ecology and how we get involved with integral spirituality. That's going to make the difference in our life, but we have to embrace it ourselves.
Yes. Thank you very much, Sister Angela and Dr. Shauna Adams, for exploring our theme today, educating our children for engaging on our world of wonder and beauty. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.